صباح الخير. أهلا وسهلا بالجميع.
Good morning. Welcome to all of you.
حضرات الضيوف الكرام،
My dear guests,
الأساتذة الأجلاء
dear
والخبراء
professors and experts,
ورؤساء
and
الهيئات
presidents
والمنظمات
of commissions
الوطنية والدولية
and
المعنية
international national authorities concerned with transitional justice,
الذين قدموا من مختلف
who came here from
البلدان العربية والأجنبية،
different Arab and foreign countries,
السادة
ladies
الإعلاميون،
and gentlemen,
منظمات المجتمع المدني
journalists,
وضحايا العدالة
and
الانتقالية الذين أرى
just
العديد منهم بيننا.
CSOs and victims of transitional justice,
كافة الضيوف الذين حضروا
and
لمتابعة أشغال
guests who came here to
هذه
follow
الندوة،
the works of this conference,
منهم العديد من طلبة العلوم
and
السياسية
many of
والقانونية.
them are students of political and
صباح الخير.
science studies. Good
أهلا
morning,
وسهلا بكم
and
جميعا
welcome you all
في
in
بين أحضان المركز العربي للأبحاث ودراسة
within
السياسات
the CARP
الذي
for
ينظم
Arab
هذا
political
المؤتمر
studies,
المعني
which is organizing this event, which basically focuses on transitional justice, on history and memory and politics.
حينئذ باسم المركز العربي
So,
للأبحاث
on
ودراسة
behalf
السياسات
of the CARP
أود أن
for
أرحب بكم وأن
political
أعرب عن
studies,
خالص
I would
التقدير
like to
والامتنان
welcome you all and thank you for accepting to be here among us and also participate in the works of the 8th conference on transitional justice and transitional political transition and democratic transition in the Arab countries. And this conference gathered about 50 researchers and experts who are concerned with the issues of transitional justice and also the approaches and different specialties, and also included different experiences which shapes its aspects by just the potential of those who are concerned and activists in the field of transitional justice, and also the creation of reconciliation issues within the local and regional contexts. Ladies and gentlemen, if we take into consideration our duty to remember and to forget, and also forgiveness and accountability, so here there is the land of transitional justice, and it has been the concern of many societies which have been going through a very long journey with a hope to deal with the effects of the injuries coming from the past. So we don't have clear maps, or let's say common maps, to deal with these issues and to reach the end, despite the fact that we have noble concerns, basically, which are based on the literature concerning transitional justice and also the constitutions, and also it has been shaped by the work of literature and arts and the museums, and also the building of rehabilitation centers, and also the skills and the experts, and also there are donators who supported the work of transitional justice, and also local and public initiatives. And despite all the complexity of the issue and the variety and the specificity and the common among all experiences, this conference has been concerned with looking at transitional justice from different perspectives and from different approaches, and which basically embody the richness of the experiences and also the challenges that are related to it. And this represents the objective and the subject of the topic of this conference. So, ladies and gentlemen, questions about success of experiences in transitional justice or failure are always asked, not in terms of results, but also the potential of societies to recall its experience, so that it will be just restricted to living the past experiences without looking forward. So the societies should be, or the experience should just deal with the past with the appropriate dose so that it will not cover its present, and also there must be a dose of forgetfulness so that it will just overcome the problem of being, let's say, respectful to the past. So we will deal with issues and we will deal with these experiences from different approaches. So there are different issues that will be raised during this, conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all, and I'm sorry for, let's say, the problems related to organization. Just you on the way here to Tunisia, and would like also to thank the Tunisian authorities who worked hard to facilitate the solving certain problems related to travel. And again, I would like to thank the people, the participants in this conference. We're talking about CSOs, experts, national authorities, international authorities who worked hard with us in the organization of this conference about this very, let's say, complex issue, which is transitional justice. So I would like to give the floor to my colleague and friend, Abdel-Fattah Mady, from the main Center for Arab Political Studies. And after this intervention, we'll have just the intervention of the Tunisian Authority for Transitional Justice, and we give the floor to Mrs. Siham bin Sadreen. So after this opening, we listen to Madame bin Sadreen. So the floor is yours, Mr. Abdel-Fattah.
السلام عليكم جميعا وأسعد الله أوقاتكم. أنا أيضا أرحب بكم جميعا في اللقاء
I would like to welcome you all for this 8th edition of the Congress organized by ACRPS on a yearly basis on issues relating to democracy and transitional democratic transition. I would like to thank His Excellency the Dr. Mehdi Mabrouk and for all that he has done to organize this meeting. It is normally organized with the branch we have here in Tunisia, and I would like to thank the organizing committee in Tunisia and Doha for all the efforts consented for the organization of this meeting. I would like also to extend my thanks to Mr. Rodwan Ziada from Washington branch, who contributed to the preparation of this meeting. Unfortunately, he could not make it. This Congress, as mentioned by Dr. Mehdi, concerns issues relating to democratic transition and transitional justice. We are going to have more than 20 papers that have been selected by a selecting committee from ACRPS. And there will also be, in addition to that, testimonies, international testimonies presented by foreign and Arab experts. Very quickly, I would like to mention that the concept note for this Congress was extremely rich, and it covered most of the issues that will be raised here, but there are also issues and questions, numerous issues and questions that color our present today and that need to be tackled. I would like basically to refer to 4 major issues. Many or some of the studies have covered some of their aspects. Question number 1 concerns the possibility or the applicability of transitional justice in totalitarian contexts. Can you ask the perpetrators of violence to self-question and to recognize their sins that they have been committing for years and years? This, or do you think, or as some people think, does democratic transition does it have to be preceded by issues relating to democratic transition? The second question, and is no less important, does transitional justice, which is basically concerned by human rights violations issues and political issues, does it have to be extended to cover social justice? Today, for the last actually month, maybe years, there are demonstrations and protests in the streets for social and political reasons. So here, political democracy per se, even if it is achieved in this part of the world or in any other part of the world, is facing important economic and social challenges. So where does transitional justice stand? Question number three, and this is quite important. This is a geopolitical question with social and military dimensions. Issues of human rights violations that supposedly have to be dealt with by regimes of transitional justice are not local problems. They have international dimensions. And most of violence today is done with a view to the war on terrorism. And they also concern countries from, European countries, but also countries like China. Other forms of violence or transgression is similar to the methods and ways that have been applied by other totalitarian regimes or by countries like Israel. You would find that it replicates methods that are used by many other countries said to be terroristic or totalitarian. You would have people with covered faces and special law enforcement forces that are implementing different forms of violence. And this, as you can see, concerns many countries, including Israel. So how can countries or systems of transitional justice handle this issue? Is it possible in the first place? How can you hold accountable those who make it possible for violence perpetrators or transgressors to transgress? And how can we distinguish between terrorism on the one side and forms of violence perpetrated on protests and protesters? There's another question, and it may enhance the achievements or the objectives that we want to achieve through transitional justice. Some of the experiences in African and Latin American countries have referred to local traditions and values to enhance issues of reconciliation and transitional justice. So the question here is how can Arab countries in the future draw benefits from the values that our culture contains, Arab Muslim countries, culture contains. These are some of the questions I wanted to ask. I'm sure there are many others that could be asked, and I hope that this seminar will have fruitful and enriching discussions and debates on these issues and other issues related to these. Now, I would like once again to extend my thanks to all of those who joined us and for having answered positively to our invitation. We will start with the first presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. I would like to thank the organizers of this conference, and especially the Doha Center, and especially Mr. Mehdi Mabrouk, the Dr. Mehdi Mabrouk, who just saw that the presentation of the Tunisian experience as a mission important for dealing with past violations and also to understand how the authority, the national authority, or the Truth Commission works. So the Tunisian experience is the last one in the world, and in which a commission has finished its works and it published its outcomes. So the slogan that you see, or the logo, for us, for our children, and for our country, it was the main guidance of the works of the Commission, just to send the message that transitional justice is important, because it's not a luxury, it is a necessity, and it is essential to save the country. So we will try to understand the additional value of the Tunisian experience to the world. And in the first level, what are we talking about when we talk about transitional justice? What is the main issues, and what are the major challenges that the Commission or the authority encountered, and how these obstacles, and what was the effect of the work of the authority on the society, and what was the contribution to the democratic transition in Tunisia? When we talk about, transitional justice in Tunisia, we talk about this. It looks that it doesn't work. Please help me. If possible, I need to get some help, just to get, this, to solve these technical problems. I wanted to show you the topic or the subject of transitional justice. It's a video which doesn't work. It works on my station, but it doesn't work in the presentation. So this short video, about 6 minutes, it will give you an idea why transitional justice is important. If we don't deal with the injuries that we see in front of us, there was a kind of injury that will remain for the rest of the time, and any kind of reconciliation will fail, or any kind of reform will fail, because we are not able to just do the reparation and necessary reforms. I'm going to skip this video because there is a technical problem, and then I will move to the next slide. Generally, the national authority for transitional justice is accountable to just one objective that has not been reached. So we talk about mainstream media, so they ask about whether they reach it, whether the authority reached the reconciliation or not, and if not, then it failed in its works. So the question that we should ask here, what are the guarantees provided by the legislator? So if possible, we try later on to see the video, because it is important. So the commission or the authority has its tied by a law, and this law managed and enabled the authority to finish its works, because there has been many attempts to lead the work of the Commission to the failure. And these attacks have been from different institutions and from different parties. Why the law is important? Because it's the one which just guaranteed the works or the success of the works. And if there are other experiences in the Arab world, it's very important just to focus first before doing any kind of work of transitional justice. So there must be a law which protects the authority, and it will be a source of accountability about the accomplishment of its missions. So what are the missions given to the authority? So first, I mean, truth. The second is just doing investigations, and third, reparation, and fourth, it's just recommending the main reforms and encouraging for reconciliation. And then, after that, suggesting reforms which just lead to reconciliation. So the work of the authority is not limited or not restricted to reconciliation. So reforms also are not among its missions. So the government should do that. It's the executive body that has been attributed by the law the work of implementation of the recommendations of the reforms just suggested by the authority. And the advantage of this law is that it has been constitutionalized, because as you all know, when we talk about transitional justice, we talk about exceptional procedures. And without having this law constitutionalized, so we won't have any kind of legal accountability, because many voices have been claiming, why are you just making them accountable? Why are you questioning them, interviewing them? Let's turn the page without knowing what happened in the past, and these people are above accountability. So the protection of the whole process has been through the constitutionalization of the law. And I read the article from the Constitution. So Article 149 from the Constitution, the state has to implement the process of transitional justice that is just constitutionalized, and it's not acceptable to just, let's say, revise certain laws, such as the laws which, for example, related to torture. So generally, the laws have a kind of retroactive repercussions on basically the actions of the authorities, and these cannot be eliminated by a kind of previous amnesty. So people who just try to the amnesty cannot stand in front of the transitional justice system. Or, for example, if there is illegal, let's say, actions, so the legal actions can be revised by the authority and reparation can be offered. And also the laws, I mean, or the torture, let's say, torture is not, let's say, cannot be temporary. So the authority has been given the authority of the mission of defragmentation of the system, the totalitarian system, and it has been the experience, and the only experience in the world that has been given this kind of mission, and we managed to just discover that most of the actions of torture, most of the actions have been driven by certain kind of interest that is given to the people who are involved in, I mean, these abuses. And we organized public hearing sessions which lasted for, let's say, and hearing sessions, which lasted for more than 3 days, and also we had certain sessions lasting for 61 hours, and we had also organized also the public hearing sessions, in which we listened to certain witnesses, and also these public hearing sessions, they enabled us to just make the public aware of what happened during, the past, the last period. And we managed to discover the most important thing is that we made the violations of the old regime during the public hearings accessible to the public, and they were broadcast, directly broadcast. There was broadcast live to the public through the different TV channels, and the public hearings lasted until 2 o'clock, and it was a marking event in Tunisia, the public hearing sessions. And the Tunisian experience also had the advantage of having a comprehensive program of reparation. So we learned from other experiences, and the decision that was made by the board, the authority board, is that reparation has to be comprehensive. First, we have the apology from the president of the country, so because the country did not protect the rights of the people, and then we have material compensation and reparation for the victims, and also those who were just kicked off from their jobs, they were just reinserted to their initial jobs, and also a reparation of regions. Here we talk about the social approach to transitional justice, and it has been the core of the Tunisian experience, because we dealt, victims are not only individuals for us, or groups of people, or CSOs, or let's say organizations, but also we dealt with issues related to marginalized regions in the country, because those regions has been considered by the old regime as the source of opposition. So these regions, so we should ask the question why these regions have been or were marginalized despite the fact that they had huge resources. So the main reason was that those regions were a kind of the main source of opposition to the old regime, because generally those regions somehow protected, people, activists who were just against the old regime, and the marginalization was around a period of 58 years since the day of independence. And the fourth advantage of the Tunisian experience is the process of legal accountability, and just the Tunisian experience it has shown that if there is no legal accountability, and the reconciliation will be of no use. We won't have a reconciliation without legal accountability, and the Tunisian experience until the present day and today, there are just cases of transitional justice in front of the courts. So we have about 200 cases covering about 2,000 just executioners and about more than 3,000 victims. And the third point, the last advantage, so also making, let's say, the government responsible, or the state responsible for reparation and reform. So I mentioned all this because in order to reach all this, there must be kind of mechanisms and also procedures. And the most important thing or mission accomplished by the authority is the setting of a system, a kind of, let's say, electronic system or digital system. So it is one of the authorities which has all its works digitalized, and also the authority developed certain of, let's say, SOPs, or let's say guidelines for following the work and facilitating the work of its agents. So all the works that we have just in the authority, there are guidelines who help our just workers perform, and also these procedures and these guidelines, they just ensure transparency. So we received about 63,000 files, about 12,000 women victims, and more than 50,000 male or cases referring to male victims. And after treating these files, we have 47,000 which relate to violation of human rights and political rights, and also economic and cultural rights, violation of cultural and economic rights, and also we have also other files relating to other violations, and like, for example, financial corruption, and also marginalization and exclusion, which is systematic exclusion of region, and we have also certain violations related to electoral procedures. We are going to focus on these violations. We will just go forward quickly. So legal accountability is important because the authority is dealing with certain cases, because all the attacks and the campaigns just were targeting the authorities. All the lies have been created about the work of it has been stigmatized mainly as it is doing just nothing. It's just spending the money of the taxpayers just without taking or serving the interest of the country. So when we move to legal accountability, they were not just those who attacked the authority, they were not able to attack just the legal system. So they tried to make kind of indirect attacks. So we had just attacks and threats coming from the security syndicates or unions, and they were not, for example, they refused to protect the courts, and also they asked some executioners from the security bodies not to attend the court sessions. And there is also another thing that has been done or accomplished by the authority, and also attribution of responsibilities of the state and other, let's say, bodies or authorities. So after investigation of violations about, for example, corruption and violation of human rights, we discovered that there are foreign authorities or bodies which have been responsible for the violations, and the authority, council or board sent a memorandum to France, for example, the French state, for just doing certain, let's say, violations, dangerous or serious violations of human rights after the independence, and also violation related to the economy, and also the, let's say, concerning also the financial abuses, which just generally do violate the international agreements and the treaties concerning the kind of debts that Tunisia has to France, and those debts were somehow illegal. And we sent, let's say, a letter to the French presidents informing them and also asking them to just apologize to the victims in Tunisia, and to also apologize to the Tunisian state for the French violations, and also to pay financial recompensations, and also just to omit illegal debts. And we provided just all the documents which show that the debts were illegal. So on the day that, for example, France left Tunisia, they multiplied by 25 the Tunisian debts. So the agricultural, what we call independence, have been bought by Tunisia. So we paid the ex-colonizers for the lands that they left in Tunisia. So we did not get our lands back for free, but we paid just to get our lands, our Tunisian lands. So the same thing for the national companies. We paid huge amounts of money to the French, and that's why we have debts that are still hanging until the present day, and we are still until now paying those. We also sent a letter to the International Monetary Fund, which has been responsible for violations of human rights, especially in the region, what we call just in the of phosphates and mines, and those kinds of, let's say, violations related to that region, which produces, in which we have the mines, just the major mines in Tunisia, and that region, the region of Gabis and the region of Gafsa, are suffering from, let's say, health problems and violation of the environmental rights of the people living in those regions. So we also sent letters concerning these problems and issues. So there is another advantage and aspect of the authorities. So legislator created a procedure of, let's say, the procedure of reconciliation and refereeing. So you can have someone who just committed certain violations, or an executioner. So if so the authority here just plays the role of the referee here, and it will ask the violator just to just apologize, especially for financial, let's say, corruption, and also it will ensure the returning of the money stolen, and also it will provide just, it will try to find the whole process through which corruption has been just committed. So it's very important that it's not only just getting back the money, that's very important, yes, but also it's important, more important is somehow to explain how, let's say, the corruption system used to work and to function. So somehow we managed to get kind of, let's say, 9 refereeing decisions, and we managed to get 740,000 million dinars to the Tunisians. So the Tunisian state somehow spent about 54 million dinars, and we managed to get 745 million dinars. So concerning reparation, I want, let's say, because, I mean, just it was our main issues. So the dignity of the victims has been the core of our work, and repairing for the victims was also important for us.
Now the truth and Dignity Committee had to face important challenges. 2 key challenges. First, access to archives. The battle of archives was perhaps the most important battle we had to fight. The text was very clear. All parties and entities were required to provide all information that they had at their disposal to the IVD, whether private or public. So this is a very strong text, as you can see, as regards access to information. However, we had to face very strong opposition of some official bodies that they would never obviously object directly, but they would all the same never disclose the information. The most important challenge we had concerned the access to presidency archive, and it is absolutely key. And this is a privilege, actually, because sometimes you will never find the traces or evidence that concerns violence or breaches. But in the presidents, we found what was sufficient condemnation of the presidency as regards violations perpetrated against people, institutions, and this allowed us to build, they provided the basis for many of the cases that we have submitted to justice afterwards. The two parties that have refused to give us, to hand over the archives. Obviously, we could not, this was not the case with the presidency archive, but we managed. But political police, what we call political police, that is to say the MOI, simply refused to give us the political police archives, because this is absolutely important, because it shows us how the mechanism of reporting people was working. And in order to have very clear idea about this, we had to go back to what we call this political police. The military court also refused to give us any details. We had copies provided by the victims themselves, and this is how we managed to get information provided by the victims themselves. We had, however, to ground the testimonies of those victims and to cross them with the absolute proofs or evidence. And the third battle, it concerns that of autonomy. As it is the case with all different truth and dignity commissions in the world, we were no exception, meaning we also had to face attempts from different political parties as regards the work and independent work of the commission. Sorry. It came from foes, but also from friends, because even friends wanted to do the thinking for us and to do the organization for us. So, you know, that we had to face this, but we were strong enough to resist. And this is how we refused, and sometimes even simply had to fire some of the members who did not stand to honor the sermon they gave, to fight for the mission and vision of the Commission and not to serve other agendas from outside. Eventually, there is what we call the battle for survival, because they could not guide us or force us to accept their agendas. They eventually, I mean, the Commission, because it had the right to extend its work for 1 year, the IVD was allowed to submit a motivated letter to the Parliament. And they wanted to bend the text, if you want, of this legal text, the text of this law, and they had a historical session whereby they wanted to abort the work of the Commission, but they failed, and the result is simply a very poor voting, and the quota was not there, so the decision was never issued by the Parliament. So it was a very shady and hazy situation. The executive authority could not stop the work, or sorry, the Commission, but they simply put an end to all budget that was allocated to us as of 2018. And this is why we've been working, starting from 2018 until now, with no money with no budget. Now, thanks to access to archives and to hearings of victims and eyewitnesses, the Commission managed to understand and to deconstruct the working method of the regime. Indeed, its work was based on a network of economic, political, financial control, together with the judiciary apparatus, plus the misinformation that was provided by the media. We also had hearing sessions to understand who were the symbols and the key figures of this misinformation, and we managed to publish this report as regards the dismantling of the dictatorship system. We also managed to understand the internal and bylaws of the MOI, and this is through the secret decrees, the confidential decrees that regulated work within the MOI. They are not at all published under the journal, the official journal. We managed to see what was happening, and we discovered that political police was run by two administrations, one for technical services and the other one for special services, they call it, because you will say we never have any such a thing as political police. Indeed, we don't have one, we have two. And indeed, political police doesn't work on security issues, but rather on politicians. The dismantling of the dictatorship system was perhaps one of the most challenging tasks for the IVD, because corruption is particularly difficult for us to dismantle, because in appearance corruption does never surface. You can never find it, because these people have money and they will allocate it to use experts in accountancy, in finance, etc., to cover corruption, so that in appearance it never shows as any form of corruption. It is absolutely legal and lawful. What we found, we actually focused on 6 domains, and we investigated them, and we found out how the corruption mechanism was operating. After that, we had a cartoon. We produced a cartoon on the working method for corruption, because sometimes, you want to explain it to common laymen and common people, they would not understand it. So we had those ads or spots, animated spots, it's like cartoons, to explain how it worked and how they can exploit and use and abuse the state for their own lobbying interests. Therefore, the rule of law can never work under these conditions. I'm going to move very quickly. Maybe I have gone beyond the time allotted to my presentation. The recommendations of the Commission. As you can see, the Commission plays made it possible to lay hands on the machinery of corruption and dictatorship. After diagnosis and understanding and detection of how it works, what was next? Simply, we had to show how to go beyond it, because transitional justice has a look backward only to develop the future and the present. How to allow Tunisia to have a country, to have a future where all of its children live together despite their differences and despite the complexity of its configuration or setting. This is, again, an institutional issue. This is a structural issue. It's not a personal choice. I may choose whatever I want, but I may find myself in society where this would be difficult. However, when you have frames, laws, and control, sometimes you would have an arsenal of very nice and tidy legal texts, but these are for window shopping. You would find eventually that the state is run in a completely, sometimes opposite, different manner. You know, we had the government under Ben Ali in Kasaba, whereas this is the real one, the genuine one, was in Carthage. There were parallel ministers that simply had the keys, or that had. I mean, they controlled all decisions. This is. Sometimes, this is why sometimes you would find that laws that are nicely put are simply turned over against themselves. And in order to avoid this situation, there has to be oversight mechanisms that work in a coordinated and solidarity-based manner. In Tunisia, we found that there were 7 control entities, including the accountancy court, but they do not coordinate. They have no information crossing from one place to another. And you will find, and there is overlap and replication on the self-same corruption, for instance, dossiers or files. And so part of the reforms concerned networking and the creation of a platform, internal platform, where they would give us the historical overview of all cases and control. Again, we don't have very good oversight over this or monitoring of these files, including monitoring on the part of society. When they say, you have said that, I mean, people should say, you have promised to do this, you said you would do this, and you would have never done it. Plus, we needed to have free media, because the media are the ones that are mostly and perhaps foremostly used by the corrupt entities. The media has been used in Tunisia to attack the achievements of the revolution, and they did not manage, and they will never manage. And perhaps the most important indication of this is the last elections, with this wave of protest against corruption. And it showed that there is a public agenda that they needed to respect. Thank you very much.